This is the Korg X5DR. I got this one off eBay a couple of days ago and now it's arrived through the post. I've been playing around with it and everything seems to be working, which is good. But this instrument is from the era of volatile memory, which means there's going to be a backup battery in there somewhere. So what I'm going to do is open it up, have a look inside, see if it's the original battery or if it needs changing. And what I thought I'd do is I'd take you through the process while I'm at it. Now, the internals of an X5DR are obviously quite different from that of a JX3P or a Drumtracks, for example, that both use a similar backup battery system. However, the process of opening up the unit, locating the old battery, removing it and replacing it with a new one is very similar across the board, assuming you know what you're looking for. So hopefully this video can provide some kind of general guidance on the process involved for anybody who's not entirely confident with soldering, dismantling equipment, things like that. The first step before you even start to dismantle the unit would be to back up any memory of the instrument that you don't want to lose. In this instance, I've only just got hold of the instrument and there wasn't anything special on there, so I've not bothered with this process. Once you're happy that you've got your memory backed up, the next step is to crack open the instrument. So here I've removed the top case of this X5DR, and looking around inside I've managed to locate the original CR2032 cell battery here. Now, as you can see, we can't get to the bottom side of the board with this PCB still located in the case. So what I need to do next is to remove the screws holding it in place and remove the ribbon cables so that I can take the PCB out to get to the other side. Okay, so while you're watching me take the PCB out of the instrument in the background there, I thought I'd take this opportunity to answer the question of why we even have batteries in these instruments. It all comes down to the fact that the majority of synthesizers back from this time used RAM to store patches. RAM's obviously a great system because you don't need to have any moving parts, so you don't need to have a floppy drive or a hard drive. But the negative side of that is that it needs to have a constant trickle of power when the instrument's off to keep the memory stored. So this was the main method that instruments used from the introduction of patch memory back in the very late 70s, all the way up until about 4 or 5 years ago when flash-based memory started to take over, which again doesn't require a battery backup. Okay, so now we have this PCB entirely removed from the case. In the end it was only 3 screws and 3 ribbon connectors holding it in there. And now if we look at the other side of the board, we can see the battery's held in place by 3 pins here on the other side. So next step would be to remove these. Now, as you can see, this is a bit of an awkward job. It's one of those ones that you really need free hands for, or a clamp or something like that. But in the end I did manage to get it off without too much difficulty. That is the old cell removed from the PCB there. That's been installed on there for approximately probably 20 years. And surprisingly enough, it was still working when I got hold of it. So now we are ready to put in a replacement battery. I tend to use CR2032 cells, similar to what was already inside this instrument. They spit out 3 volts, so they're often suitable to replace barrel cell batteries that you get in some of the older instruments with a backup battery, even though they're not the same shape, so you might have to bodge them to fit onto the board. In this instance, in fact, the original PCB actually has mountings for a type of socket that I'm intending to use, that you can see here, that the cell slides into. The benefit of using a holder, of course, is that next time you have to change the battery, you don't have to tear the whole instrument apart. These battery holders and cells can be had for very cheap off of eBay, Amazon, those kind of places. I've had these ones knocking around in my toolbox for a while, but having a look now, it looks like you could get both for a matter of a couple of quid. Right, so the next step, obviously, is to solder this new battery holder onto the case. Now, obviously, make sure that you get the polarity the right way around. On the X5DR, the polarity is printed onto the PCB itself. However, if you're changing a battery from an instrument where it's not printed on the board, the key is to just make sure that you note down the polarity of the old battery before you remove it. Now, you might be asking, well, what's the big problem if it's still working and it's maintained in the memory? Why don't you just wait for it to go flat before swapping it out? And the problem with that is that these batteries have a tendency to leak over the board. You can see this board's got some incredibly fine traces on it. If you were to have a battery acid leak over this board and it burnt through those traces, you'd have a lot of difficulty repairing the instrument. It'd pretty much be a throwaway item at that point. So more so than just keeping your patches safe, it's worth replacing these batteries as a matter of course to keep the instrument as a whole safe and running for years to come. Okay, so there we have it. That's the new holder in place. Next step is to slot in the new cell, the CR2032, and then reassemble the instrument. Once that's done, obviously switch the unit back on and just give it a quick test run to make sure that everything's working as it should be. Okay, so here we go, the moment of truth. And everything seems to be working as it should be, which is good. You will probably find when you perform this operation yourself that the first time that you switch the instrument back on, all of the user patches will probably be a garbled mess of jumbled up data. So if the instrument has a master reset procedure or a factory reset procedure, you might want to carry that out, and that's what I'm going to do with this X5DR in this instance. Okay, so there we have it. That is the X5DR reassembled now, and everything seems to be working perfectly, which is ideal. Now, as I mentioned earlier, not all battery replacements are going to be as simple as this X5DR, given that it's already got the mounting positions for the CR2032 holder. So I thought I'd just show you one of my more bodged jobs, as it were, inside the drum tracks here. Now, this originally had a larger barrel battery, and you can see that I've had to use a little jumper here between one of the pins of the holder and the original through hole on the PCB. Now, this is still relatively sturdy, and it seems to be working fine. I've had the battery in there for about a year now. And this is the same kind of process that I'd use for any kind of instrument where it's not got a pre-made mounting for the CR2032 holder. So there you have it. That is the whole battery change process, and like I say, that applies to almost any instrument from the era. If you've got any questions, then feel free to place a comment in the comment section below. Other than that, thanks for watching, and I hope this has been of some use.